Supermotos. It seems like every 5 or 7 years they kind of ebb and flow like the tides of motorcycling. Sometimes they're cool, sometimes they're not, but it kind of feels like they're really coming back, don't you think? Supermotos are just this wonderful fixture of early 2000s culture, like Jinko jeans or Viva La Bam. The extreme sports were just in the water at that time. And if you didn't live through that, well, honestly, I just feel sorry for you. You missed out. But you can capture some of that magic by riding a supermoto, which combines some of the best elements of motocross, flat track, road racing, all wrapped up in one fun pint-sized package that loves to do wheelies. What's not to like? Now look, motorcycling is very niche already, and supermotos are a niche within a niche. But as other forms of motorcycling has grown over time, supermotos have gotten a little obscure. But again, there's some really cool new models coming out that suggest that there's plenty of interest in them now. So let's break it down and find out if supermotos are really coming back. Okay, so what exactly is a supermoto? You might look at something like Suzuki's DRZ 400 SM or the Kawasaki KLX 300 SM, and you might say, well, it's a dual sport bike with road-going tires and 17-inch wheels and long travel suspension, and that's kind of it, right? And while that's a little bit reductive and kind of true, a real supermoto is a motorcycle that was derived from racing and that is typically way more rowdy and raucous because of the way it's designed, built, and the way it revs out. It's the same way that when you ride a motocross dirt bike versus a dual sport, you can see a pretty big night and day difference. Or how a standard bone stock street legal 1000cc motorcycle absolutely pales in comparison compared to a MotoGP bike. Calm down, Supermoto kids. I'm not saying your bike's like a MotoGP bike. It's called an analogy. Look it up, and that's a big word for you. Supermoto racing dates back to the 1970s, if you can believe it. The term was coined in 1979 by Gavin Tripp, where it served as a segment on the show of Wide World of Sports. This segment was originally composed of talented racers from the world of motorcycling, which is pretty neat. So you'd see road racers and motocross guys all competing in this supermoto category to see kind of who was best. Whereas today, supermoto is its own distinct thing that doesn't really see a lot of crossover from other athletes. Supermoto racing is a unique hybridization of different forms of motorcycling, and the races are commonly held on road racing tracks or even medium-sized go-kart tracks. The paved segments are juxtaposed with an off-road section made up of packed clay that's used to make bermed corners and jumps similar to those found in motocross. It's sort of like the best of both worlds. You get to do some jumps, you get to do some slides. It seems like a lot of fun. Due to the all-encompassing nature of a supermoto track and really the idea that you can't really build a purpose-built motorcycle for it, you kind of had to make do with the dirt bike with street tires and street wheels on it. Often with the addition of specialized suspension for that. You're not gonna have crazy, dirt bike suspension, and you can't have very rigid sport bike suspension. It needs to be somewhere in the middle for these motorcycles. But unlike the relatively lazy and long-running dual sports we've seen, as the aforementioned DRZ 400 comes to mind, which has been updated to the DRZ 4, supermoto bikes use extremely high-strung motors that make ridiculous amounts of power. If you've never ridden a real 450 supermoto, you're in for a treat. It makes a ton of torque, and it's so lightweight, but it's often at the expense of crazy service intervals and not EPA compliant. So these bikes are often sold as off-road competition use only. Even though some people end up plating them and riding them on the street, they really are race bikes. So if you want a motorcycle that can go more than 5,000 miles within an oil change, go 70 miles an hour, isn't gonna rattle itself to death, and will be somewhat comfortable to ride and pass EPA emissions, you're gonna need something like a dual sport or something a little bit more chilled out. And you're just gonna have to sacrifice power. A lot of it. Like half as much power. But by the 90s and early 2000s, supermotos weren't just dirt-converted motorcycles. As supermoto grew in popularity, some OEMs started offering factory supermotos, which was very interesting to people. They sold them both as track-only high-performance variants and as road-going models of some other motorcycles that they had, which is pretty cool. European brands like KTM and Husqvarna were some of the first to offer OE supermotos, and it still kind of stands today that if you want kind of a King Dick supermoto, you go KTM or Husky, to be perfectly honest. The rest of the big four didn't really jump on this bandwagon until a decade later, which honestly kind of reflects global racing efforts in general nowadays, where like European manufacturers are just way ahead of the curve because they're willing to try stuff, and then the Japanese are kind of always slowly playing catch up. Yeah, it's not 2009 anymore. Repsol doesn't even sponsor Honda. We are in unprecedented times. Marc Marquez is on a Ducati, but we're not talking about MotoGP in this video. KTM produced the 450 SMR and the 560 SMR. They were both super high output, ultra lightweight, very, very capable supermoto bikes. And for street use, they sold the 625 and the 650 SMCR. And they were heavier, no doubt, and featured a little bit more torque, but they were still super fun and relatively lightweight. And even to this day, you can go to a KTM dealership and pick up a 450 SMR or a 690 SMCR, which are both fantastic supermoto offerings for street and track. I don't know how much longer you'll be able to do that because KTM might not be solvent for the next couple of years, but you still can right now go pick up those motorcycles. Even the earliest Duke models, and still to this day, KTM street offerings always have a bit of a supermoto flavor to them. If you ride a new KTM Duke 390, you can feel some of the supermoto energy. And in fact, as we'll talk later in this video, there is a new 390 Supermoto that's based on the Duke 390. So a lot of those kind of attitudes are interchangeable amongst the models. And of course, being a sister company to KTM, Husqvarna does sell the 701, which is highly based on the 690 platform from KTM. And when I say highly based, it is virtually the same motorcycle with some changes. But prior to that acquisition by KTM, Husqvarna was making their own Supermotos like the SM610. Even Aprilia threw their hat into the ring with the SXV 450 and 550, and these were pretty sweet because they had a V-twin engine, and these were a far cry from supermotos even at the time because this thing was making 70 horsepower out of a 550cc V-twin. Yeah, that's mega spicy. The Big Four started catching wind that this was a growing market, and they of course copied what the Europeans were doing, as they had been doing for many, many years. And the Japanese were like, hey, we can offer something reliable and cool and something that somebody really wants to ride. So Suzuki and Yamaha took a bit of a different tack to this, and they said, hey, why don't we take our dual-purpose trail-style motorcycles that have these bulletproof Japanese-built engines and make dual sport bikes and supermotos out of those. And instead of lasting a couple hundred miles, they actually now last tens of thousands of miles without much need for maintenance at all. That's why in 2005, Suzuki launched the DRZ 400 SM. That was a supermoto variant using their tried and true 399cc single-cylinder dual sport platform. And that's really one of the darling supermoto bikes that you can go and buy because it's basically unkillable. It's a bit of a pig, but you basically get everything a dual sport and supermoto bike can do, but in a package that is just a ton of fun. Yamaha also made the WR250X, which was the supermoto variant of their beloved WR250R, which is one of my personal all-time favorite motorcycles. Many devout and devoted supermoto enthusiasts also just go and buy two-stroke or four-stroke motocross bikes and turn them into supermoto motorcycles by putting on mirrors and compliant exhaust or changing out the tires and the wheels and kind of doing the whole conversion themselves, but that is a ton of work. We, of course, love Rockform for their rock-solid phone cases and motorcycle handlebar mounts, but they keep adding more and more new accessories that allow you to capitalize and expand on your existing setup. With a Rockform phone case in hand, you can attach it to a mount on your bike, on the dash of your car, and now even on a camera tripod. As more and more people get into motorcycle content creation, the Rockform tripod mount is a super convenient piece of kit. The 1/4-inch threads attached to any standard camera tripod, and the magnetic phone attachment allows you to super quickly attach your phone to get the perfect shot. The base of the mount is magnetic as well, so you can quickly slap the mount onto a metal surface, snap your phone onto the other side, and set up a shot without even having to use a tripod. Rockform has an astounding track record for high build quality and rugged durability, and this mount is no different. With a super strong magnet, especially paired with a Rockform case, you know your phone isn't going to budge. Rockform's been a long-time Yamanu partner, and their support is invaluable. If you enjoy your existing Rockform products and have an interest in using your phone for photography or video, click the link below and check out the tripod mount. Yamanu viewers get 25% discount as well if you use the code YN25. So hit that link in the description, use that code YN25 for 25% off. Thanks so much to Rockform for the support. Now let's get back to the show. By the late 2010s, supermotos started to really decline in popularity. The whole motorcycle industry in general declined after 2008, and riders' changes and tastes started to become pretty different than what they used to be. No matter how fun a supermoto bike is, it's seen as a weird, aberrant, and kind of just toy-esque quality of motorcycling. Their impractical, small displacement engines made them very buzzy at highway speeds, not really capable of achieving very high top speeds, and their super upright positioning made them really not very nice to ride for long distances. For riders who were in search of fun, torquey, upright motorcycles that could do wheelies really well, the 2010s were rife with amazing naked bike options. I think about something like the Yamaha MT-07 or the MT-09 when it debuted in 2013. It had Supermoto flavor, but a little bit more grown up. And at the end of the day, Supermotos, while they are torquey and very quick off the line, they're not particularly fast. Most of them top out at under 100 miles an hour, and for most riders, that's just simply not enough legs. Riders were simply looking for more versatile, interesting bikes that could do a little bit more of everything. They could commute, go to the track, go to weekend canyon carving rides, and ultimately do a little bit of every kind of street riding. If you only got room in the garage for one single motorcycle, a Supermoto probably isn't going to cut it. And as a result, very few factory Supermotos were offered into the 2010s, except for KTM and Husqvarna, which continued building them. But many of the Japanese simply gave up. The WR250X went out of production, popularity waned and declined. The DRZ 400SM was still sold, completely unchanged and carbureted, but that's good. Suzuki just didn't want to pay the R&D tax and make it Euro 5 compliant, so they just were grandfathered in and kept building it that way. But as we know, trends are cyclical, and if Y2K fashion is coming back, there's no reason Supermoto bikes aren't going to as well, and we are really seeing this ramp up now. A lot of new riders are getting into motorcycling because of the content they see on social media, and honestly, nothing looks cooler than a Supermoto bike cracking a super sick balance point wheelie. So if you're a new rider, you could get a Ninja 400 and go practice figure eights in the parking lot and wear all of your gear and blah 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 and do it that way. Or you could get a KLX 300 SM, kind of put on some mixed gear and kind of go ride it in the dirt a little bit, or pop some wheelies, or just pretend like you're a kid with your first bicycle again. Across the board in motorcycling, there's been a giant renewed interest in small, affordable, fun motorcycles. Younger riders aren't really as eager to take out a giant loan on some big, stupid, powerful motorcycle that they're never gonna own. Sure, some Instagram flex offenders will do that and they will die with their S1000 RRs, but many people aren't doing that. So let's round up what's going on in this new market. You have the KLX 300 SM, which was Kawasaki's new offering from a couple years ago. It has a 292cc single-cylinder engine, 17-inch wheels front and rear, and it really fits the bill. It's a little anemic and it's a little bare bones and basic, but hey, it's a Supermoto being made from the factory, and that's pretty cool. And it would be one of the darling Japanese bikes were it not for the newly released DRZ4. I really didn't think this bike would happen, but it did, and it's kind of cool. However, with making just 38 horsepower, still a 5-speed box, this isn't quite the brand new bike we were all hoping for, but it is cool that it exists. As mentioned previously, KTM updated a bunch of models in their lineup, and the new 390 platform now features a 390 SMCR, which is really quite cute if you look at it correctly. And of course, KTM, Husqvarna, and GasGas all have their own 690-based platform motorcycles for the Supermoto category, which a lot of people don't really consider the 690 a real Supermoto, but if you're going to be that much of a purist about it, just go somewhere else, please. And heck, I didn't have this on my bingo card a few years ago, but Ducati released a single-cylinder Hypermotard, and I just rode and reviewed that one, and it was fantastic, and that technically is a Supermoto-styled motorcycle if we're going to consider the 701 a Supermoto bike as well. And again, many of the purists are going to say that it's not a real bike, but I think it is. It's about the ethos and the spirit. It's a real Supermoto. There's even offerings from Sherco now. You have maybe Triumph going to release a Supermoto since they've just seen some good success with their Supercross and their new dirt bikes. There's a lot of stuff happening in the Supermoto space, and I really kind of have to credit those crazy Instagram clips of people sliding the bikes around kart tracks and having a ton of fun and showing what can be done with these machines. So look, at the end of the day, Supermotos are simply not going to be as popular as basically any other subsect of motorcycling. They have an outsized reputation and you see a lot of content, but the sales numbers just don't lie. They're not the most popular category of bike. But I do think they are one of the most important. As a super pure way of riding a motorcycle on the street, one that is pretty stripped down, simple, bare bones, can do wheelies, is torquey, is fun, and a Supermoto can't be beat. From my personal opinion, I do think dual sport bikes give you a lot of the same flavor and character that a Supermoto does, but at the same time allows you to go off-road, so I think they're really the ticket, but Supermoto bikes are a little bit more sexy, and I get it. And for some reason, teenagers from the Netherlands and other Nordic countries never shut up about them. It's crazy. So yeah, Supermoto fans, they're a vocal minority, but they are vocal nonetheless, and Supermotos will always have a place in motorcycling. I'm curious to see what's coming down the pipe. Are we going to see other manufacturers come out with their own offerings? Is this kind of peak, 2025 Supermotos? Do we now have this new generation that wants to try them? I'm really excited to see what's going to happen in this space. And I'm just praying to God that Yamaha releases an updated WR. They now have not only second mover, but probably third mover advantage at this point. Just make a WR350 that just mops up with everybody, costs a little bit less than a KTM, and you've done it. You've won. Make a Supermoto variant and make a dual sport variant, and everybody will buy it because it's a Yamaha. Make it look cool. Why not? Give it like the dark side of Japan styling. You could do it. You could do it. I know you could. So what do you folks think? Are Supermotos trendy? Are they cool? Are they not? I don't know. Let me know down in the comments what you think about today's video. Thanks so much for checking it out. I'll catch you guys in the next one. See you later.
Boys, it's really sad that this video is now over, but you know what's not sad? Winning a free motorcycle, and that's what this Triumph Street Triple 765 RS is designed to do. You know, nobody gives away bikes like your sweet Papa Yam. Nobody's doing Triumph Street Triples and Panigales and all the latest and greatest stuff. If you want access to win, become a member on yamdu.co and don't miss your chance.